All right, everyone. So this is my second podcast, and this time I have Paola with me. Paola is one of the PhD coaches in Dr. Barry's private community. I put a link in the description, and it's a lot of fun there. I'm one of the PhD coaches too, but I haven't been there as long as Paola. So she's the expert, and she is the expert on oxalates. So we had a great conversation about oxalates in Las Vegas at
We had a
um,
great time in Las Vegas.
at COSI. It was so much fun.
Yes,
I
so
was
fun.
wondering, like to start this, would you explain what are oxalates and why are they so dangerous?
So oxalates are plant mechanisms that are used for their defense. As we know, plants can't run, can't fight. Well, some can, but mostly they can't run away from us or from their predators, I should say. Plants really don't want us to eat them. Like, no organism wants to be killed and devoured. So they have their own plant mechanisms. They're acids. They're actual acids, oxalic acids that can cause harm and irritation and when they're being ingested. So technically, oxalates are just plant defense mechanisms that can be detrimental to organisms who ingest them.
Okay, so well, not everyone is equally sensitive to oxalates, but when people are very sensitive to oxalates, maybe we'll start with you. You are very sensitive. Like what happened? What's your story?
Well, and before we go into that, the reason why most people, not everybody is as sensitive as I am or other people are. It's not that we have special bodies that are more sensitive. What determines the sensitivity for the most part is the amount of toxicity. So you could be me, or another person could be me, or I could be not so sensitive, which I am not right now as much as I used to be, because it's all a matter of the amount and the the amount of toxicity that has been built up over the years. So it's completely proportional. How much you've abused oxalates is how sensitive you're going to be to them one day when your body has had enough and your body is like, we can't handle any more poison in this body. So then that's when the problems start. And the body starts, because most people don't really have issues until they stop eating oxalates. People who are moderately toxic with oxalates, like most of the population are, because they never really stop eating them, they don't have an obvious reaction. But people who are, it's kind of like if you have a jar and you fill it with jelly beans, eventually it's going to be it might be like hanging in and they might pile up for a little bit, but eventually they're going to fall out. You can't just keep pouring into them and they're not going to fall out. It's the same thing with oxalates. There's a point where some people have just ingested so much oxalate that their body can no longer take it and it pours out. And this shows up in your body as different symptoms. There's all types of symptoms, and that is a little bit individual. Some people react in one way, some people react in another. And there's also a matter of some people react, it's usually one-sided, or it's often one-sided. Some people are left side react dumpers, people are right side, and some people react in all kinds of weird ways. So I just wanted to say that just to explain the point that it's not that some more people react more to them, it's that some people have abused them more than others.
So it's not like
Another,
lactose
yeah,
intolerance where some people can have no dairy and some can have a little bit,
right,
but
exactly.
it's an accumulation problem.
It's an accumulation problem. And there is one caveat, and that is that there are some people who will be more sensitive to them, even if they haven't gotten to that point. And the factors for that are antibiotic usage, because there is an organism in our gut that does work to try to clear these oxalates. And I think it's called something like, the name is a little hard, but I think it's Oxalobacter, something like that. And it's an organism in our gut, and that is very sensitive to antibiotic use. So people who have had a lot of antibiotics, especially from young, once this organism or this bacteria dies, it doesn't come back. There's no getting it back unless you're doing a fecal transfer. Might be the only way to get this back. So some people who have abused antibiotics or who have been on antibiotics a lot would be more sensitive to oxalates than somebody who has an intact gut, or people with leaky gut and so forth would be more sensitive. And so there are some things that could make a person more, sensitive, but mostly it's this accumulation issue.
Yeah, that brings me back to my childhood. I was on antibiotics 2 to 3 times a year due to some sinusitis. And so they would, when they started actually going in with a device and poking through the bone and flushing it, that's when I said, I had enough. I'm not going back to that doctor, never. And then the
It's rough.
problems just disappeared. But that was probably over a course of 3 or 4 years where, as a child, where I had that every.
And that's definitely a risk factor. Definitely.
Oh,
And for
wow.
example, my daughter is even more sensitive than I am. And that's saying a lot. And that's because she had antibiotic misuse and overuse from a very young age. She had ear infections, sinusitis, and strep throat chronically, really bad to the point where she had lost her hearing for a little while when she was about 2 and 3 years old. That's how bad the ear infections were.
Oh,
And she had a lot of antibiotic usage, and she's extremely sensitive, much more than I. And then on top of that, we went on a once we went on all these diets because of all her allergies, we ended up in a heavy veg protocol, and it was almost vegan. It was just pretty much vegetarian with a little bit of chicken and a little bit of seafood. And so then we made the problem worse by going 12 to about 15 years, no dairy, which I'll explain in a minute why that's a problem, and high oxalate, like very high oxalate. So this poor child, on top of the antibiotic exposure, much earlier and much more than I ever even had, on top of that, abusing the oxalate, high oxalate foods for 12, 15 years. So anyway, this would predispose a person. So there is that aspect of it that can be a risk factor on top of the normal accumulation and clearing that is just the body does naturally, trying to defend you.
okay, interesting. So I keep that fecal transplant in the back of my head, maybe.
Yeah, I know. If I were to not have been able to heal myself, that might have been the only option for me. But luckily, I'm on the other side of it. So I saved myself from that transplant. Thank God.
So
It is
basically,
a little.
to heal yourself, you have to abstain completely. But what happens if you go from 100 to 0 in one day?
Yeah, no, you wouldn't want to do that, although I did that, but and we know more now. So to go back to my story then. So what happened to me was that when I was in my late 20s, I already had my kids and I was very inflamed, very overweight. I was eating a sad diet, even though I was always a careful eater. I tried my very best ever since I was a teenager. I always tried. And so I ate a lot of low fat foods, tried to eat vegetables and fruits, tried to avoid dairy and meats and everything because that's what I thought was the
And
healthiest.
red meat.
And red meat, although I'm Hispanic, so we don't Hispanic people don't typically avoid red meat so easily. So I still had red meat from time to time, thank God. But it's just I was very diet conscious because I had a weight problem from childhood on. I was always a chubby kid, always, always. And once I was in my late 20s, or even mid 20s, I started feeling really bad. Especially after my first kid, I had a lot of IBS-C symptoms and colitis, and I just had terrible stomach pains. And so the more I avoided foods that I thought were the issue, the worse I was getting. And then in my late 20s, I started having chronic bronchitis and chronic sinusitis. And I was on antibiotics a lot. And they gave me the Z-Pack like every 2 weeks. It was ridiculous to give me that much antibiotic constantly. And it only made me worse. And I was very obese and sick and tired. I had acne from here to here. My fibromyalgia was out of control. I would go to, physical therapy, and they told me that I was the equivalent of an 80-year-old when they would
Oh,
test my
wow.
range, my movement, and everything. And I was like, gee, thanks.
Hmm.
And I was always a very strong person physically, like I have a strong kind of a tomboy build. And so it was hard for me, I had always been so strong, to all of a sudden can't even carry frying pans or a jug of milk or anything because my wrists were so painful that I couldn't carry anything. I could barely drive. Like when I drove like this, because I
Yep,
couldn't
yep.
hold both hands on the steering wheel long enough. And it was just really bad. The pain had gotten out of control. And I had a doctor who didn't help at all. The only thing he said was, oh, you have fibromyalgia. And I was like, well, what am I supposed to do with that? Like, what does that even mean? And I'm like, I'm constantly sick. What's wrong with me? I went to my doctor and I said, what's wrong with me? I'm sick 95% of the time. I'm either sick with an infection or I have so much pain that I can't get out of my bed. I wake up feeling like a truck ran me over, like what's going on? And the only thing this brilliant doctor said to me, and he had been my doctor for 10 years, he goes, well, you know what, Paola, it's just so sad. How do I explain it to you? It's kind of like the equivalent of seeing your favorite race car driver slow down and leave the sport, but what can you do? And this is his wonderful scientific medical advice, that I was a slow down race car driver and that I needed to just sit down, I guess, and retire. So I'm just like, at this point, I'm only like 33 years old. It is ridiculous. And with
You
time, we
were
moved to another
young.
state.
You were
Very
supposed to be
young.
strong.
I was supposed to be at the peak of my life, and I was already done. So it
Yeah.
was like awful. And especially somebody as strong as I used to be and athletic as I was. Um, so it was just ridiculous. I didn't know what else to do. I dieted constantly. I did every diet known to man. I tried everything. Nothing worked. And I was very disciplined. So definitely discipline was not one of my problems. I'm not even a craver. I don't even like sweet. I mean, I can eat a sweet. I'm not gonna say like ew sweets, but they're not attracted. They don't call my attention. I'm not attracted to them. So, but still overweight, inflamed. So then we moved to another state, and I learned from a naturopath trying to help my children with their various allergies. I learned about diet, and I started dealing with my children's behaviors too, and their allergies with diet. I studied everything. This is how I got to know so much about nutrition and food labels. This is why I know most foods, like the back. You can tell me a food, I mostly know what's in it. What ingredients or a product. So I learned a lot. Unfortunately, this is when we all kind of went through this progression of paleo and, well, gluten-free, paleo, and etc. Eventually the superfoods and a very, very vegetable heavy diet. So we had removed dairy from the diet, wheat from the diet, soy, corn, everything, seed oils, food colorings, and preservatives, and all of that. So we had a very clean diet, and a natural whole foods diet, and I made everything from scratch. But the amount of high oxalate foods was outstanding. Like I can't even, now that I think about it, we probably consume 2,000 milligrams of oxalate almost every day. And that is very
What were
scary.
your like food staples?
So my food staples were almond flour, almond butter, almond everything, almond milk. I did make the almond milk homemade, which is actually probably worse because it's even more concentrated. We ate rice tortillas. We ate a lot of rice, which at least the rice is low oxalate, but it is high carb. And my husband's diabetic. So anyway, rice, and we did corn for a little bit, but then I was having a lot of PCOS symptoms. I have PCOS and I was having a lot of problems with the corn. So I removed that. And we did get much healthier once we removed corn from our diet. But I was mostly every vegetable you can imagine, but especially quinoa and lentils, spinach smoothies. The spinach smoothies I made had spinach, almond milk, turmeric. I mean, it was just
Kind of like an oxalate
celery. It was
bomb.
like an oxalate bomb. It was the worst. And cinnamon and like cardamom, like it was every single super high oxalate thing. Beet, even rhubarb. I would buy frozen rhubarb and put in there. So I mean, it was like probably 2,000 milligrams of oxalate in one shake. And the max that a normal healthy person without any problems, the max you should get a day is 200 milligrams a day. So imagine just one shake for me, just one of these juices for me had about 2,000. I
And then
always
you have
felt
that every day.
terrible. And not every day, but I had them often. And I
Yeah.
always felt bad after having them. And I would always try to think what was the culprit. Maybe it was I always blamed that maybe it was, the type of milk, or it was something, I didn't know what to blame. I was just like, right, if there's no, I would put eggs in it sometimes to make it more healthy. I say, oh, it must be the eggs. So then I
Oh
didn't
yeah.
put eggs, which probably the only redeeming nutrient in that
Hmm.
shake. And I took it out because I thought, oh, I can't. Anyway, so it was just really bad. And then eventually I got so sick and I had a psoriasis attack in the back of my neck. It was about that big and red and raw. And it even kept me from sleeping. It was hard to work because just moving my head like this was excruciatingly painful. It burned, it itched. I tried everything. They gave me all kinds of antifungal drugs, and they always put me on antiviral drugs that then started shooting my kidneys down. They thought I had shingles, and they put me on anti-shingles meds and things like. I mean, it was just really bad. I tried everything natural, nothing worked. I also had candidiasis throughout my body. And so it was just a mess. And then I decided to go carnivore. I did it on my own. I started thinking, well, if candida is fed by sugar, if I remove everything that has sugar in it, then maybe I can heal the candida, and then maybe I can heal my psoriasis. This is my line of thought. Well, when I looked at everything I ate, everything had carbs, a lot. Everything that millet and quinoa and rice and beans and legumes and all these things were full of carbs. And I was like, what am I going to eat? And then I realized that meat and eggs were the only things I could eat. So I started doing that, and I did that 0 carb diet for 10 months, and I healed everything that I
Also,
had.
no dairy?
And that time I still didn't do dairy because I didn't think I could. I was highly allergic to dairy. Every time I touched it, I would get asthma, I would get attacks, I would feel horrible. And so I was quote unquote allergic to dairy, and my children too, quote unquote. And I say quote unquote because now I know the mechanisms better, and I understand that we weren't allergic to dairy. We were oxalate poisoned, which shows up eventually as a milk allergy, and it's not really an allergy. So I did not.
You said it cleared up everything.
Everything.
How long did that take?
Probably 4 months is when I started really feeling amazing, and the rash went away in 4 months after I had it for like 10 months without any improvements. In about 4 months, it's pretty much died, and it was just like a faded color,
So I think this is important to hear, because when people go on carnivore and they do it for a week, and then they say, I don't think it's working for me. Like I don't feel well.
I've been on this thing for 6 weeks, and I'm not. No, it's gonna take a little time.
It does take time. Like there are stories where they have like incredible improvements after a week, but that's not the rule. Most people really.
Right. That's just usually a very healthy person that's just maybe eating too many carbs, and when they take that out, their spiciness goes away, or their bloating goes down, and their brain fog goes away. Okay, I'm better. But people who are really, really involved, like some of us are, that's not going to work right away.
We also got to see that it takes a long time, decades, for all of this to build up. It's not going to go away in a week.
Right. And the dumping of oxalates sometimes doesn't even show up till 6 months after being a carnivore. So, and for me, it never really showed up because I feel like I still had, first of all, it was too toxic probably, but I think just removing it for my body, because it was already reacting so much. It wasn't even some people who eat some oxalate then have no symptoms because their body's not getting rid of it. Mine was so toxic. Then when I stopped them right away, my body was like, oh my gosh. And I felt so much better. And I didn't have at that point any kind of dumping or any reaction. I just felt better, 100% better. Like I had been poisoned and somebody took out the poison. That's how I felt. And it wasn't per se, I think, the carnivore. It wasn't what I was eating. It was what I was not eating, is what I took out rather than what I left in. So that for 10 months, I was like a new person, lost like 40 pounds. It was amazing. And so after 10 months, I thought, well, I'm healed now. At this point, I knew nothing about oxalates. I just thought I was removing sugar and killing candida. So 10 months passed, and I walk and go back to my very healthy diet full of vegetables and fruits and healthy grains. And I can go back to that because I'm cured now, right? I don't have to do that crazy diet anymore. I can eat healthily like I used to. And
balanced.
And balanced. Well, I didn't really care much about the balance anymore because I had seen how eating just meat was like extremely good for me. So I realized that there wasn't technically a need for balance. I just thought, well, this other food is fun and it's good for you. So why shouldn't I be able to eat it now that I'm healed? That's all. So I liked it. I love vegetables and fruits. I'm obsessed with them. I'm that way. So unfortunately, I like what doesn't like me. But yeah, so then I just was like, okay, great. And it lasted me about a year. I was able to hang in for about a year feeling okay. But again, I had learned to eat meat finally. And so I went back to my old diet, but not really, because I did incorporate a lot of meat and eggs after that. Unfortunately, I went right back to juicing, not the shake so much, but I was juicing fruits and celery and things like that. And so I started to feel sluggish and tired again, obviously with the higher carb creeping back in. I started to eat some corn too and rice because all of a sudden I could handle the corn just fine. This is just because I had cleared my system for so long that I was able to tell her, to hang in there for a year or so. And then in about 2 years, I put back on all the weight, and then I started having the pain again. Pain started creeping back in, my knees, my feet. By the way, I used to have plantar fasciitis, horrendous, for like 5 or 6 years. Really debilitating plantar fasciitis. I could barely walk. It would take me an hour to be able to walk in the mornings. I had to soak my feet in hot water before I could get up and go to the bathroom. That's how bad it was. My husband would have to bring me the hot water for my feet. So the pain started coming back and it was not pretty. And I gained all the weight and more. And eventually in 2018, I found myself almost right back where I started. And so then that's when I found out about keto. And when I
But
saw
you didn't
keto,
clue in, right? You didn't.
no, I didn't clue in. I just thought, oh, well, I must have just been eating too much junk. I did realize I'm like, I got to stop the corn and I got to stop whatever, I'm eating too many carbs. I got that because at that point I knew about carbs. So I was like, I'm just
Yep.
eating too many carbs. Then I just got to quit the corn and quit the, slow down the rice. And I mean, I got that, slow down the beans. I knew by then that. But when I saw keto, I was like, oh, well, that's a way easier diet than I used to do. So this would be great because this is a lot less restrictive than what I had already put myself through 10 months, a couple of years before. So I thought, oh, this seems very doable. So I started keto. And actually, when I did keto, I started making me have to use more of the high oxalate foods again. This is what happened. So not only so maybe I wasn't getting fatter, but unfortunately I started reacting again and getting sicker because all of a sudden the almond flour recipes and the almond milk, because I didn't, I was trying to do coffee. I
Big
didn't usually
staple
drink
on
coffee.
keto. Yeah.
On keto, big staple. People want to do chia seeds. People want to do almond butter. People want to do, almond milk or these creamers that were all almond creamers
All the
and
book
chocolate
no,
things.
not the book, the baked cookies, like the
The
cookies,
baked
the
goods were all,
muffins,
yeah, muffins. They got
keto
almond
bread.
flour, they've got chocolate, they've got tahini, they've got, all these things, nuts, and all of these things that are really, really high in oxalates. So I went, and then drinking a lot of tea because, I wanted to drink something good, not juices. So you replace juices with tea, black teas, chai teas. All of these teas are bad, bad, bad. And that's what you go to because you're trying to drink something other than fruit juices, and so yeah, so then I was losing a little weight, not a lot, but then I started getting all these reactions again, and I was getting really sick, and I was just starting to have the pain, the fibromyalgia. And then I started having this new thing that I never, like these dumping symptoms, this runny nose, this constant ear pain, and the ringing in my ears, and the gritty eyes, and sneezing, and stomach pain. And I just was not feeling well. And I said, you know what? This keto diet's not working for me. I still hadn't put two and two together. I'm like, this
Right.
keto diet is not working for me,
And I
So,
think many people start keto and experience probably similar symptoms like you do, and then think, okay, I'm just feeling worse on keto, so it's got to be keto that's here at fault. But it's
right.
not.
And keto's got nothing to do with it. Keto means eating whole foods, real foods, and it's not almond flour and chocolate and nuts. That's not keto. Keto is eating low carb, high protein, high fat, or whatever, moderate fat, moderate protein, whichever works for you. But regardless, you're eating a good amount of protein and fat and a very low amount of carbs. That's keto, and usually no grains and blah, blah, blah. But keto is not cookies and brownie recipes and almond milk. That's not keto. But people think that's keto, and it's not. Those are foods that people put in there trying to eat something they like because they miss what they used to eat. That's all that is.
Right.
So I tell people, I'm like, you're blaming keto. It's not keto. It's your choice of foods that are causing you the problems, not keto. So then but in my mind, I go, you know what? I'm just going back to what I did before because what I did before worked for me. And I was like, I'm just going back. And by then people started talking about carnivore. And I'm like, carnivore, that's kind of like what I used to do. And I thought, oh, I thought I had invented carnivore, but I didn't
Yeah.
invent it. I just didn't know anybody at that time who was doing that. Although I think Zen Life or somebody was out back then. I had read a couple of blogs because we didn't have all this stuff we have now, no YouTube, no Facebook. This was back in 2015 or something, 2014. Anyway, so then I went kind of carnivore, a flexible carnivore, but carnivore all the same. And then I started having the dumping symptoms so bad. Then my body, because I really removed the oxalates, and my body was like, whoa. And then I had horrible, every symptom in the book I had.
Like what?
No, you want me to go through the symptoms? Okay.
Yes.
So a person that stops oxalates all of a sudden overnight It's a variety of symptoms. It depends on the person. It depends where they're stored, where their oxalates are stored. It depends on places in your body that are injured, places that you already have inflammation at. They get attracted by these joints or these tissues, and they typically can pile up where you have inflammation. And so then that's why usually where you hurts is where it hurts the most, and things like that. If you're a person that has a lot of kidney stones, then you might have a lot of urinary symptoms. If you're a person that has skin issues, you're going to have rashes and eczema and psoriasis. And then there's people that have several of these things. If you're a person like me with fibromyalgia, then it's going to be pain in all the joints. So usually your weak areas or your areas that you have trouble with it's probably where you're going to react and the symptoms are going to show up. And this could be multiple, not just one thing. So for me, common symptoms, and I had most of them, are urinary problems, either frequent urination, sluggish, like you don't have a good stream, or painful, or incontinence, where you can't hold it. You run to the bathroom, but it's too late, that kind of thing. Frequent urination, all night. Usually a lot of dumping occurs at night because at night your body clears your system and detoxes. So it's very common to have symptoms at night. Restless legs, insomnia, headaches, vertigo, tinnitus or tinnitus. I'm like Dr. Barry, we say in the South, tinnitus. Especially anything in the eyes, gritty eyes, runny eyes, itchy eyes, burning eyes, in the ears, burning ears, ears that are clogged with fluid, itchy, burning, painful, anything in the mouth. You've got lip sores, canker sores, tongue sores, rashes in the palate, rashes in your throat, sinusitis, anything in the nostril, sinusitis inside your nose, or runny nose, itchy nose, clogged nose. And then you've got also pain in your private. This is the whole, if anybody wants to go look at if they have that symptom, go look in the Vulvodynia Foundation online. There are links. Maybe I can send it to you and you can add it to this video, which is the foundation that Sally Norton, how she found out her problem was because she had that symptom and she went looking for that foundation, or her husband found it. And when she went into that foundation's website, she saw and she learned about and she was a renowned nutritionist and licensed, clinical nutritionist and dietitian. And she didn't know all these years until she was 50. And she suffered with most of this, the foot pain, the plantar fasciitis, all of that too. But the vulvodynia, this is because there is pelvic pain and all types of strange pain down there that is very sharp and painful. And that'll be part of that too. Also, like I said, the feet, the joints. And those are the most typical. Some people can have anxiety as well, or palpitations. But
I
those
heard
are the
something
most.
about crystals, like
The
pushing
crystals
through the
come out in your
skin.
skin, right? Crystals can be dumped through your eyes, through your skin, through your urine, and the ones in the urine can be seen in their tests. Through your feet, your ankles. I have sometimes sores that won't heal, so I always have sores in my ankles or in my feet, that on the top of my feet, little sores that would never heal. And I kept picking out what seemed like a crystal or like a hard substance, almost like a little crystal or a salt. It looks like a piece of salt. That's what and you keep picking it out of that same sore, and that sore never closes because it seems like it's a constant avenue to keep dumping these little salts out, looking crystal out. And I kept having these sores that were open for weeks and weeks and weeks, sometimes months. And those have gone away. I've never gotten one again. But
Nice.
that happens. And some people dump out of their eyes, like Teresa, our co-coach, she dumped a lot out of her eyes, the crystals. So you will feel a sandy, gritty feel in your eyes a lot. And that's a lot of these dumping too. But those are the most common.
It's a little scary. But
Oh, plaque in your teeth too. I almost forgot. Plaque in your teeth could be another one. It looks like plaque, but it's this hard pieces that are so weird because you almost thought you've got a piece of your tooth out. And when you look at it, it's not your tooth. It's just these little like plaques. And it's the same thing. It's these calcium deposits that come out of your teeth, your gums and things. Yeah.
wow. So when we were in Vegas, we had a long chat about this, and I love chocolate. So you were trying to get me not to order a certain kind of keto bricks and not to I have such a hard time overcoming that, and it's probably some sort of addiction too. Because one thing is eating carbs and being addicted to sugar, but then you can be addicted to the sweetness too, or to the foods you always enjoyed. Um, Now, people who can moderate this, you said they should not have more than 200 milligrams of
Milligrams.
oxalates.
Right.
To
So
put that
people
into
who are
perspective,
healthy.
how much is in chocolate? How much is in raspberries? How much is in spinach?
Okay, so a normal person who hasn't had any issues with antibiotics, who has none of these symptoms I mentioned, who hasn't really overdone oxalates ever in their life, um, and they're pretty healthy and they don't have any body pain or anything, then I would say, 200 milligrams a day is a good amount that they can survive. I mean, again, we're putting 200 milligrams of poison in your body for no reason. So again, it's the most that you should have. Doesn't mean you should have 200 a day, because obviously you'd want to poison yourself as least as possible. Nobody would
It's
say,
not a
how much
goal,
mercury?
like with
It's not
alcohol.
a goal. Yeah. I mean, how much mercury can I get away with every day? You wouldn't
Yeah,
say
yeah.
that. You would want to avoid all mercury if possible. So again, but we know when it comes to eating and treats and cravings, it's not that easy. When something is like cyanide, nobody craves cyanide, so I get it. But again, so it's not a goal, but a maximum. So 200 milligrams a day for a healthy person. And if a person has any kind of issues, rare, weird, whatever issues they have, I would say 100 would be the most. And for somebody who's already oxalate toxic and has to already overcome it, 50 a day is supposed to be the max. And somebody who is actively reacting or dumping, 20 milligrams a day would be the max. Now, to put this into perspective, if you look at chocolate, I believe that 3 tablespoons of chocolate is probably about 100. So 100 probably. Berries are about, for 100 grams of berries, it's about 45 or 40. So these are a bit, depends, because they're higher hitters. If you got something low in oxalate, it would be anything from 2 to 10 or 0 to 10. That's a low oxalate. And then moderate would be anything like 20 to 50. And then high oxalate things would be above 50. So 100 grams, which is like, I would say something like a fourth cup or a half cup about of almonds, let's say. That's a heavy hitter. So that one's probably around 600 milligrams, just that
A
many
half cup is
almonds.
a lot too.
Kind of a lot, a half cup, but still it's a lot. That's why it's like 600. But if you make almond into almond flour or almond butter, it's very easy for it to just be like 3 tablespoons of that would be,
Yeah.
the 600. So it depends. Chocolate is not high, it's moderate, but it can add up fast because it's just the tablespoon of cacao. So to make like a brownie so if you want to eat chocolate, you want to be able to do maybe just 4 little pieces, and you want to go for milk chocolate rather than dark chocolate. The darker the chocolate, the worse it is,
Or
and the
white
more high
chocolate.
in oxalates. White chocolate has no oxalates. So when I eat chocolate, I buy white chocolate because white chocolate has no oxalates, pretty much. So it depends on what you want to do. So you can definitely play with it, and you can still have some of your favorite foods, as long as I would say if you try to stay under 100 milligrams for most people, you would be fine. And so you can get little things in. Avocados are about 60 for half an avocado. So for the most part,
That's
if you
probably
can
good
try
for most people.
for most people, half an avocado, you wouldn't want a whole one, because then that'll get you upwards to 15 milligrams of carbs, 15 grams of carbs. So you wouldn't want to eat more than that anyway, because you don't want to take away your whole 20, grams of carb a day allotment.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's quite doable. But the problem is that once you start doing it every day, eventually you could run into some accumulation problems. So definitely try, that's what I'm saying. If somebody say, well, it's hard for me to give up chocolate, I say, we'll do it twice a week, stay under like 50 or 100 milligrams those 2 times, and you might be okay, So it just depends on the person. I was so toxic when I went sort of flexible carnivore, that second time around, I was so sensitive that I couldn't touch anything. If I even sprinkled cinnamon on something, I had reactions for days. If I touched
So
anything, I would
cinnamon
have
too.
lip sores. Yeah, cinnamon is like a 4th teaspoon is probably like 40 or 30 milligrams of oxalate. And these are, of course, I'm just pulling them off the top of my head, so
Ooh.
they're approximate. Don't come at me. They're not
I made,
exact. These are
yeah,
approximate numbers.
I made cinnamon rolls in a mug, obviously with almond flour. And okay, so that's a
And this
double.
is the problem with keto treats is not even that each item. The problem is that most of these combine all of it in one, and that's when you're getting serious trouble because you've got cinnamon, walnuts, almonds, chocolate, and then almond flour, and this whole treat has all of these things combined. At this point, that treat is 400 milligrams, because
How
now
about
you put them all
hazelnuts?
together. Which one? Hazelnuts are
Hazel.
pretty high. Yeah, I
Ugh.
think they're 45 milligrams, so they're probably the same as chocolate,
So I
if not
really
more.
can't trust my body. I mean, in
No,
regards to
because
oxalates.
in regards to oxalates, now people who are oxalate toxic or who have this accumulation issue, obviously, are people who are really attracted to these foods. Makes sense. I was very attracted to anything and everything that had oxalates in it. So that made it really easy for me to really go off the deep end, especially with the excuse that they're superfoods and they're healthy
Yeah,
for you and they're
right.
antioxidants and everything. When you hear antioxidant and superfood, run, because 9 out of 10 times that's a very high oxalate item.
Blueberries.
Blueberries are the lowest berry
Oof.
actually, which is
Okay,
why I
so
eat them a lot. And it was obvious because I always ate blueberries and felt well and did well. And this is why any food that I always didn't react to, after I learned about oxalates, I realized that that was a low oxalate food. Everything that I did well with was a low oxalate food, and everything that gave me problems was a high oxalate food. And now it's like I've tested it over and over and over and over again. I'm 100% sure of this. I've tested it, so I know that Sally Norton is right, because I have not only tested it on myself, but again, my daughter is extremely sensitive, and then my oldest daughter is not sensitive, but she did go keto several times and then started eating these foods a lot more. And she now has seen it as well. She knows when she feels ill, and it's just when she's overdone oxalates because of the keto treats. It's not the sugar. I mean,
no,
yes, we get sugar is
it's
bad,
also
but
the sugar, yes.
it's also the sugar. But with these type of symptoms, it's the oxalates, period. A lot of
So
these keto flu things and all of that.
when you are really clean on your diet, how long does it take you to realize, okay, this food is not good? Is it like within a matter of minutes, hours, or days?
Okay, some people are late reactors and some people are instant reactors. I'm somewhat of an instant reactor. So for me, if I eat something high in oxalates or has hidden oxalates or something, within 15 minutes, I'll know. Whereas my daughter is a later one and she'll probably get problems the next day. Yeah.
But it's
So
still
it could
pretty
be
close.
so anywhere between 10 minutes to 24 hours, you'll know. It's rarely, maybe people who aren't as toxic, it would take them a few times. And maybe by the end of the week, they'll start having problems. And then, but the days they were doing it, they were fine because all of a sudden they started consuming it. The body said, whoa, let's hold back. Poison's coming in. And then by the end of the week, maybe that person was like, okay, that's enough of that. I'm going to clean up my shop now. And then all of a sudden they react. So it just depends on the amount of toxicity again. So after being clean for a long time, and I dumped oxalates for about 2.5 years, like significantly, significantly, to a point where it was extremely debilitating and annoying and bothersome, and interrupted all
You
activities, all
you
facets
really
of my life.
trusted the process.
I really did, because once I started seeing the patterns, first I learned, and oddly enough, it was Paul Saladino. How sad. But anyway, it was Paul Saladino who introduced me and opened my eyes to begin with. So this is when he was really doing very well. And he came and gave a talk at KetoCon, and I was like, whoa, because he suffered a lot with that. And so he knows that, at least, which is great. And then after that, also Maria Emmerich's husband also had a talk on that. And then after that, I found Sally Norton, because they had learned from Sally and they introduced Sally, and then I went looking for her. Once I started learning, it was like my eyes were open, my brain just went psh, and I was like, all of a sudden I understood my whole life. It was like incredible, eye-opening, and
It
everything makes
explained
sense.
everything, all your symptoms.
Everything, absolutely everything. And yes, I had inflammation from being fat and from eating too many carbs. But again, I'm not a sweet tooth. I wasn't somebody eating ding dongs or donuts. I hadn't eaten wheat in 17 years. I stopped eating wheat in 2007. I haven't touched one since. So I am the example of a person who was eating very healthily and yet was extremely sick and getting sicker by the day. So I knew it was more to it than carbs or sugar because I didn't explain all of these problems I had. It was easy to fix the sugar issues right away. My fatty liver went bye-bye in a couple of months. My pre-diabetes was gone. I wasn't as inflamed. I lost some weight, you know, whatever. All of that was easy to fix. The
Yeah.
oxalates were not easy to fix. Not
Yeah,
easy.
you had to clue in first and then
Well, first
take the
I didn't
steps.
know what the heck I was doing. Yeah. Mhm. And the thing that we've learned now is that you don't have to do it overnight like I did. Now, if you can and your symptoms aren't too bad, then sure, try it. I mean, it's worth a try. But if you're suffering, you don't need to suffer. You're gonna dump forever. So it's not a race. Find a comfortable rate for you to dump out. And just take your time. You have the rest of your life to do this. You don't have to kill yourself. You don't have to live with rashes and incontinence and acne and all these things. Like, you don't have to suffer so much, because now with Sally's research, we've learned that you can just bring down your oxalate consumption gradually and surely, and do it that way if your symptoms are too severe.
So you mean the symptoms from dumping are too severe. How do you slow down the dumping?
So it depends on the person. Some people can so instead of going no oxalate, they can go moderate oxalate. So let's say they take an inventory of what you're eating. The first thing you do is take an inventory of what you're eating. Guess at how much, kind of guesstimate at how much oxalate you're eating currently, and maybe bring that to half. So if you're doing 500 milligrams a day, try to go to 250 milligrams a day for a month, and then try to slice off another 50 every week until you're down to your 50 or your 20, whatever is your goal. You don't have to be 100% zero. You don't have to go Lion diet unless you're doing it for some other reason. But if not, there's no need to kill yourself. Yeah. Yeah, you have a different reason you're working with. But if somebody if they really take a look at what they're dealing with, and it really does seem like it's oxalate, then just slowing down gradually, doing a ketovore diet or whatever. If you're not even doing keto or anything like that, just doing a low oxalate diet will do so much for you. But going slowly and reducing things slowly will slow down the dumping. So some people can maybe put something back in, like some green tea or some chocolate. The problem is that some people, I've noticed that some oxalates are more problematic to some people than others. For me, peanuts are really bad, even though they're not as high, and almonds are horrendous. I don't touch almonds at all, ever, 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 because I touched them a few times and it was instant and severe. Whereas I can have a little chocolate now and it doesn't do that to me. But if I do too much chocolate, I will pay. So there's a line. So for me, I used to be 20 milligrams. I can now do 50 milligrams. And the less that I have toxicity wise, the more I can tolerate now. I'm almost like more of a normal person now. So now I can put cinnamon in my yogurt almost every day, and it's just a sprinkle. I don't have any issues. 3 years ago, that sprinkle would have given me a lip sore, a rash, or I would have been peeing all day long. It just would have been awful. But now that my toxicity levels are so much lower, so do have patience, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and you will feel better. And once you're all better, you won't have to be so strict. I now can eat a ketovore diet. I can now have, avocados that I couldn't touch before at all because it would cause me so many problems. And so I can eat a little bit of oxalate now, and I'm fine because I'm finally done dumping. I have to be careful not to overdo, but I know my limits now.
Yeah, you said it can also show up as an egg allergy. Did you have problems with eggs?
Usually not an egg allergy. Usually shows up as a milk allergy.
Oh,
So
yeah, milk allergy.
yeah, a milk allergy. So here, the issue with the milk, and this happens a lot. A lot of people are out there giving up all their dairy because they think they're allergic to dairy, and most people are not. Only real, truly allergic people are the ones with anaphylactic type of, responses to the milk proteins, but it's really rare. And there are people that have lactose issues, of course. But when you talk about just dairy like cheese, butter, maybe heavy cream, sour cream, yogurt, most people will do fine. The people who have reactions are 9 out of 10 times when I start peeling the onion and seeing what's wrong with this. A lot of people come to me with problems, and I start peeling that onion and trying to find out the root of their problem. Most of these people with the milk reactions or the dairy reactions are the folks who are oxalate toxic. And the more severely oxalate toxic they are, the more they react to milk or milk products. And here's why. Oxalates are very calcium loving. And we know this because like kidney stones are made of, they're calcium oxalate, you know. And so what happens is that the minute that somebody who is not doing a lot of dairy puts dairy in their body, that oxalate is like, yes, and it wants to bind. It binds to the calcium in the dairy. And as soon as it binds, then it starts dumping out of your body in some sort of calcium form, kidney stones, the teeth plaque, the crystals out of the eyes, the pain in the ears, the vertigo because the crystals are moving around in your ears and all these things. And so the milk actually protects you from oxalates because when they bind to this acid, the acid doesn't destroy your body as much. It smooths, it's not as irritating. And so having always some sort of dairy with an oxalate is actually protective. And a lot of people, unfortunately, right now are doing a vegan diet, which is high in oxalate and zero dairy, zero calcium. So what's happening is these oxalates are binding to the calcium in their body, taking it out of their bone. And then people are going to have bone loss and all this. And they're like, oh, you know, and it's because they're vegan, yes, but it's also because they're letting the oxalates take all the calcium out of their body. So doing always some sort of dairy with oxalate foods not only protects you from the damage of the oxalates, but it also preserves your own calcium and your bone in your body, in your teeth and in your bones. So this is why it's so important that if you are going to be eating oxalates, to pair them with some sort of dairy. If you're doing berries, have them with yogurt. If you're doing chocolate, make sure it's milk chocolate of some sort, or, you know, and
You just make
once,
my case for chocolate.
yeah. And again, so you can't have a little chocolate, but put
Yes.
the dairy with it to really soften the blow. And once I learned that, I actually stopped because when I first started keto, not only did I increase my oxalate foods again, I took out dairy because, oh, no dairy, no dairy. You know, I don't do well with dairy. I'm allergic to dairy. And that wasn't true. What I was oxalate toxic. And when I did that, I made myself worse. And then I didn't have any success on keto. And I blame keto for not being a good diet. And that wasn't
Yeah.
it.
So what makes you feel that you're dairy intolerant, even though you're actually
But
oxalate toxic?
the
What what
type
what
of the type of reactions are common. They're almost always the same. Watch your people that come to you and ask you for help and start watching the patterns. They say, I can't have dairy. The minute I have dairy, I have congestion. The minute I have dairy, I get a runny nose. The minute I have dairy, my eyes are all gritty and runny. The minute I have dairy, I'm
Oh,
having
and that's the
diarrhea.
dumping.
Or yeah, and what it is the oxalates are desperate for calcium. And the minute that milk gets ingested, right away, the tongue swells, they've got a sore, they've got a rash, their eczema gets worse.
All right.
It's always these symptoms are typical. They have this cystitis, they have problems peeing, and all it is burning pee and UTIs, and they blame all of this on the dairy. And it's not. The dairy, poor thing, is just trying to get these oxalates and clear them from your body. It's trying
Yeah,
to
yeah.
help you, actually. Yeah, it's kind of a perfect design almost of nature. And people are getting in the way of that by thinking, I'm trying to be healthy. And I get it. I did it. I thought dairy was awful. I almost left eggs because I started to believe all the vegans that it was chicken periods and all these stupid things. And it's all very convincing and it all makes sense and it's sexy, like Dr. Berry says, but it's not true. These are natural foods. These are whole foods, and the body can do very well with them as long as we're not getting in the way by doing dumb things that are unnatural, like just eating vegan. But yeah, so and I don't mean, I know it's uncomfortable, so it's not like I get somebody that comes to me and I'm like, oh, forget it, now you can have all the dairy you want. The symptoms are uncomfortable, I get it. So I'm not saying start drinking heavy cream by the gallon. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is limited amounts of appropriate zero carb dairy can be very helpful in this process, to protect your joints, to protect your tissues, and to protect your bladder, and also to preserve your calcium in your bones.
Yeah, like if you do yogurt, make your own yogurt to make sure it's fermented longer, and then it's lower in carbs.
Right, especially when you first start. When I first
Yeah.
started, I made all my own yogurt, and I only had my own homemade yogurt for a long time. And I even started it at first just with goat's milk. And eventually I went to heavy cream, and eventually I can buy yogurt up on any corner street. I can buy yogurt at a gas station and eat it, and I'm totally fine. And this is somebody who used to have asthma attacks from eating dairy. That's how allergic I was.
And it wasn't the
And
dairy.
now it wasn't the dairy. I can have cheap half and half at a gas station. At this point, I can have any dairy I want. Doesn't do anything to me. Now, obviously, I try my best to get organic. I still do try to make my own yogurt when I can. And I buy quality cheeses, and I do have a lot of goat and sheep, preferably if I can. Yeah, and once I've no longer oxalate toxic, I'm no longer milk sensitive, and I was very sensitive. I was like Dr. Berry right away with the and the draining and the irritation in the ears and the sinusitis. I was just like him, and I don't have that anymore. And I use some sort of dairy every single day of my life now, and it's a big part
That's
of my
interesting.
diet. Mhm,
And so now I came home from Germany
mhm.
and started having another flare coming on. And then I said, okay, now that's it. I'm going to start the lion diet. So from 4 months eating chocolate every day, eating raspberries every day in my yogurt. Well, it was combined with dairy, but
That's
eating it
good.
every day. I went zero overnight. And then I did not feel like I had any oxalate dumping. So I thought, oh, okay, I'm not sensitive. What do you
But that's
think?
not the case, because it can take somebody 4 weeks to 6 months or even a year to all of a sudden start. So, and it's very cyclical. So like perhaps this flare that's trying to come onto you now is because now finally you're starting to detox some, which is why I warn against fasting right now, because if your body is already in a detox mode right now, trying to be, then you wouldn't want to encourage it along. So what you could do also is put in a little bit, something, anything, one of your little chocolate, if you can, without going off the deep end, put
Yeah,
in
I
a
didn't
little
know.
chocolate or
Can't.
something.
I
It's hard
can't.
because then maybe it'll be hard to stay lion then. So I get that.
Yeah.
But if it happens to get worse before you go to cortisone shots, that might be worthwhile. But I mean, a piece of chocolate is still better than a cortisone shot. So you might want to test things out whenever you're ready, or if you want to ever test it, test putting in some oxalate when the flare comes and see if that helps. Now, me, because you're not so heavily toxic, you might be fine. For me, I couldn't do that back then because I was so toxic that I would just react. It didn't work for me. I couldn't put in
Yeah.
oxalate to stop dumping. It didn't work for me because it's like trying to get one more jelly bean in there when it's up here. It's just no matter, you can't do that because it's going to spill over. And that was
Yeah.
my problem. So, but people who are moderately toxic, not severely toxic, can do that, put in a little to then calm it down. So it can definitely, it's about the right time. Anywhere between 3 to 6 months is the typical time that people start dumping after going lion diet or carnivore. It's almost always, it shows up usually never before 6 weeks, and typically between 3 and 6 months. Very, very
I'm
common.
now at 4 weeks, and my plan was to do it 3 months. So I think it only makes sense if I do this for 6 months. But
Right. Makes
going
sense.
to the event in San Diego and in Dixon,
Mhm.
Tennessee, I have to break with that because I need to eat.
Yeah, it won't be so easy, right? So then, yeah, maybe that's the time to take advantage. But
I
just
probably
do.
need a sheet, like a cheat sheet with all the oxalate foods.
Actually, I want to buy. So Sally Norton has now come up. Maybe I can send you a link about that too. She's come up with sort of a companion book that
Oh yeah.
has the foods and the levels, so that people trying to put some in can kind of gauge what and how much they're doing and test out different levels. She's actually now come up with a companion book to this toxic superfoods book. And I've been meaning to buy it, so I'm going to buy it. But you might want to buy the ebook version, which is what I don't know if I'm going to buy it. I might buy a hard copy just because it'll be nice to travel with. Um, but I think they had a combination of the ebook and the hard book at a good price, and I might get that. So I've been wanting to get that because I think that'll be really helpful. Not everybody has this at the top of their head because they haven't been obsessively reading it for years like me. So
Yeah,
having a
yeah, yeah.
little guide with you, I think is super helpful, and it was a great idea she had.
Yeah, neat. I
Yeah,
started collecting books on my iPad too. So
me too. Mhm.
you have it with you all the time and can reference it.
Right. I love it. Yeah, I just put them in the Kindle there, and I have them in my iPad, and it's great. Yeah. So I think I'm gonna do that because that companion would be fabulous. Really easy, quick way to look at it and see what you can add. And again, also test it, because sometimes you add something that particularly doesn't work with you, and you go, this doesn't work. Try a different kind of oxalate containing food and see if that one works. Because like I said, for me, cardamom, chocolate, and almonds are no-nos for me. Like I said, I can do a tiny bit of chocolate nowadays, but it has to be one time. If I get that chocolate in a second time, I will have symptoms. So I know that those three for me are no-goes. And other things though I can do, like now I can do strawberries. Strawberries have a little bit more, but before I couldn't do strawberries, and I could only do blueberries. And now I can do strawberries and blueberries all I want. I can eat all the strawberries I want, and it doesn't do anything to me. So there are some oxalates that work better with your body and some that not so good.
That reminds me of Element. What about stevia? So this is not Element, this is just electrolytes.
Right. So I think stevia saved me because I kept stevia in all throughout everything all the time, except for those 10 months at one time. But stevia, actually, I always use it in liquid form, because stevia in liquid form, I always use drops. I never use powdered stevia, which is extremely hard to get pure stevia anyway. Most people get something that's mixed with erythritol, and I don't recommend that. Liquid stevia, liquid monk fruit, that's what I stick with. And those would be pretty much no oxalates. Anything turned into an oil or a drop or a liquid mostly has very, very low oxalate. So anytime I take a tincture, yeah, it's gotta be pure, of course. But anything like almond oil, I'll use almond extract or almond oil in my iced coffees, and that way I can have that almond flavor and zero oxalates. You can do orange oil instead of orange zest. Lemon zest and orange zest are very high in oxalates. People put those in their recipes too, and those are very high. You don't want anything zest of an orange or any citrus. What about
true lemon?
True lemon is fine because it's the lemon juice crystallized. It's not lemon zest. And if you look at it, it's lemon juice crystallized and lemon oil. There's lemon oil in it.
That's right. They have not zest, they have the oil.
Yes. And so that they work great and they work fabulous. And I haven't had any kind of problem with them. And I've been using them for years. And I'm a radar. So if something's going to be high oxalate, I'm going to react eventually. So I can test something out. If anybody has a doubt about the oxalate content, I'll try it for a week and I'll tell you. But yeah, so anything in an oil form, in a drop form, if you want to take some sort of herb for a type of condition, always get a tincture that is a drop, a liquid clear form, or at least a liquid form, because then it's very difficult for there to be oxalates in liquid. You separate the matter from the liquid, and so it's, especially if it's an oil.
So if you want to check a food and you don't have like the book or the companion book, is there a website where you can check online how much oxalates are in, like, let's say, Element Raw?
Well, there's not a lot of special foods out there that have been tested. Mostly it's all the common foods that have been tested. And there are some that are not very right. You'll see a lot of discrepancy. You'll go to one website and it'll say that that peas are high, and then another one will say they're low. So the consistency is not great. There are a couple of good websites where there's some decent lists. And I mean, I could send you a couple of links. There's a Harvard one, and then there's one from the Oxalate something foundation. So there's a couple of lists that are decent. But then the best thing I would say is get Sally Norton's book, because then with the companion and all that, you'll get the best, most accurate numbers. But there are a few lists out there that are okay, and you can roughly get it. I mean, if you look up almonds, it's mostly right. Everywhere it's going to tell you between 600 and 900. It's pretty much nobody's saying the almonds are low. So at least you'll get that high. The very high foods are pretty common knowledge, and they all kind of match up. It's the more, when we get into the details is when it gets a little shady. Another thing is, so everybody can breathe a sigh of relief. Coffee is low oxalate. I know there's a lot of discussion and a lot of people are worried. Coffee is low oxalate. Cocoa is high oxalate. Coffee is low oxalate. So just replace your hot cocoa with a coffee and you're good to go.
So no chocolate salt in my coffee.
Funny thing is, I thought I could get away with chocolate salt element too, because yes, it's very tasty in coffee. And when somebody gave me I didn't go buying one. I'm not like that. But my friend Wendy gave me a whole box of it. And I was like, what do I do with this? I can't have this. And I go, well, okay, I'll take the packet and I'll put a third or a fourth of the packet in each coffee. It'll just be a little bit and I should be okay. Well, I did that. Packet lasted me every day, obviously, for 5 days. By the 5th day, I had a lip sore. I had rashes in my throat. I was living in the bathroom and I was like, okay, elementary chocolate has got to go. So it's kind of problematic for a daily use item. I wouldn't use anything daily that had chocolate in it. If it was an occasional treat, yeah. So, but I paid my price for for chocolate salt, as tasty as it is.
Yeah, I'm kind of like tell myself, well, I'm not that oxalate sensitive, but that's
And I
probably
mean,
not the good way to go about it, right?
and not if you're trying to heal pain. Anybody with body pain, I would definitely say stay under 20 milligrams a day for anybody who has significant body pain, because otherwise you're just shooting yourself in the foot. It's really hard to gauge where your pain is coming from, and chances are that the oxalates are making it much worse. So you might not have any other symptom, but your symptom might be the body pain. Usually it can show up as joint pain, body pain. It's very oxalate acid. They're very tissue loving. They encrust themselves in tissue. They love wet mucosa, especially. That's why it's always the mouth, the eyes, the ears, those type of places. So anything that's mucousy, the
Yeah,
nose,
yeah.
yeah, and then the tissues, joints, tissues. So it just depends on each person. But again, I think knowing that we don't have to be zero oxalate, knowing that maybe at first, if you're really bad off, you do need to be zero oxalate, but eventually you'll be able to have a little bit, 20 milligrams, 50 milligrams, or even 100 milligrams, depending on who you are.
So when we talked about keto and paleo in a comparison, and I thought like paleo was actually a great first step into the low carb world because it excludes
No,
a lot of the processed foods, but it doesn't exclude spinach, oxalates, strawberries, and a lot of high oxalate foods.
right. Actually, paleo is worse than keto in some ways, depending on how the person's doing keto. I find that paleo is the first step into becoming oxalate toxic. Paleo is sort of the first step. Sadly, it's like the introduction into let's poison everybody for the name of eating healthy. It's like we all did it too. Anybody who wants to be healthy pretty much has been there and done paleo. The yams are the most problematic aspect of paleo. The sweet potatoes and the yams, that's a really bad part of that, and the nuts and the bars. That remember those bars? I forget, Lara bars. We were paleo, so we lived on Lara bars, and they're all full of cashews and almonds. I mean, it was just terrible snack. It was a terrible snack. I would have done better with a Hershey's bar. Would have probably been lower. A white
Yep.
chocolate Hershey's bar would have been much lower than these nut bars. So, and granolas and nuts. And paleo is actually a bad idea. Either eat sad or eat keto, but I would not go paleo, just because it's much more toxic, unfortunately.
So you are just
People,
like a walking dictionary when it comes to oxalates. You have like you
it's in
know
here. Yeah.
how how do people get in contact with you if they want to talk to you?
I have a Facebook group, and it's called Real Clean Keto with dots, real dot clean dot keto dot. And it's a Facebook group, and it's free to the public. And if you want to join and you want to have access to me, that's a way to find me. You can find me on Real Clean Keto on Facebook. That's pretty much
And
it. And then, of course, in the PhD community, I'm
yes.
a coach on Dr. Barry's PhD community. So if you want to have access to me in my coach's corner, you're welcome to join us. And Roxana will put the link on the notes here so that you can join our community, which is awesome. And I help a lot of people. A lot of people come to me with these strange problems because I'm known as the one that helps the people with the strange problems. And
Right.
if you're a little unicorn like me, then come to my coach's corner and we'll help you out. And usually we can do pretty well with everybody that comes to us. Everybody's doing really well. And that's another thing that helped me learn so much, is helping others. Every person that I help, and it's usually a long process, usually they become my friend, and we have a long relationship for 10 months on or something that it takes to get them healthy. I learn more helping people than I do reading or watching or doing anything else. Helping people is how it's like having your own encyclopedia or something, because everybody's so different, but yet you start really picking up the patterns, and you really start learning how the body reacts when you start helping a lot of people. The more people you help, the more you learn. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, I find it amazing us going through this journey ourselves, which enables us then to help others. It's kind of like a silver lining when you think about it.
It
Was it
is.
all worth it, the pain? Well, now with the amount of people we help,
Maybe. Yeah,
yeah, it is a
exactly.
silver lining.
I mean, if anything, yeah, nobody wants to have pain,
Right.
and be sick. But at the same time, like you say, it's silver lining because it's sort of something. It meant that all of that wasn't a waste of our time, and we didn't suffer in vain. At least
Right.
it's a positive outcome. Like our suffering and everything we went through was worth it when we can help others. So that made it worthwhile, and it wasn't just suffering for no reason. So for me, it is a huge silver lining, and it's a positive that I always think like, well, if I have to sacrifice to have been an unhealthy person for so many years, if now I can help people who feel like me get better quicker and not have to go through all the hoops and all the questioning and the experiments that I had to go through, if I can just get them there quickly, that's awesome. I mean, it's really worth it.
Awesome. I think we should do a live on YouTube answering questions following this.
Yeah, sure. After everybody watches and then they start developing questions in their mind, obviously they will have questions that we didn't think of. Then that would be perfect because then we can answer them. Yeah, that would be really
Awesome.
good. Yeah,
So
I would love
be
it.
sure to subscribe to the channel, get the notifications, and then you'll know once this will come out. Probably rather sooner than later.
Yeah. I'm here for just let me know when. I'm game.
Awesome. I
But
love
thank
this
you for having
conversation.
them. Yeah, me too.
Yes. So
Thanks for having me then. And I hope we can talk again soon.
we will. Okay, right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks. Thanks for watching.